Hello, I'm Fallon, and this week I'm wearing a hat. So this week I want to talk about my most memorable series and standalone books that I have ever read. I just picked out books that I can remember the stories of even if I haven't read them in a couple of years at this point. And some of them shouldn't be a surprise, some of them I remember the stories of and I don't own the books still, and some of them are recently read, so I mean. Let's start with the series first, and these series shouldn't be a major surprise. So I'm going to start with my all-time favorite series ever. The Harry Potter series is definitely the most memorable book series that you could ever think of. It's best for rereading the books. I mean, I'm missing one right now. I lent it out, but the Harry Potter series is my favorite book series. Can't tell you how many times I've read this book series. It's been probably about a year since I've reread it. I need to reread it. I can still tell you everything that happens in each and every book because I clearly love it. So you just can't forget this series. If you haven't read it yet, read it. If you have read it, the new illustrated books are out, so you can get those now. The next series is a little bit different, and as much as I don't super enjoy the series, I can still remember it really well because the author is really good at getting her story across and has a really nice writing style, regardless of what you want to say about the series. The Twilight Saga. You'll always remember this if you want to read it. If you want to reread it, you can jump in at like the third book and still know what's happening because you just remember what went down. You might not love it, but Stephanie Meyer is a really good author. The next series is the Chronicles of Narnia, which you can 100% know what's happening. This is definitely a series you can sit down and read and reread and reread and reread again. Good, solid, rereadable series and memorable series, and I can remember what happened in every book except for, I'm gonna say, the last battle, which was this ending of the series, but it's so hard to end a series and love it, you know? The next series is one of the best of all time. A series of unfortunate events. I can remember what happened in most of the books, but because there are 13 novels in the series, you do sometimes get a little lost. And if you're ever looking for a memorable series and something that you can sit down and reread and it's going to take up your time, definitely this series. And it's good for a lot of ages because there's no swearing, there's some oddities to it. It's definitely a memorable series for people no matter what age you are. So, definitely a most memorable series, most memorable books I've read. The next series is by Kelly Armstrong, and it is the Darkest Powers trilogy. This is probably one of my all-time favorite trilogies, and you remember what happened in each and every page of these novels. I have a nice group set, so you know they're not super thick books, but nonetheless, they are very good. And if you're ever looking to reread something too, you find new and exciting things to read in the books each and every time you read it. So it's definitely something that I would recommend and will be memorable for anyone. By Kristen Cashore, and I don't have the first two books, but I have the third book in the series, and so that is the Graceland, Fire, and Bitter Blue series. But I do remember Graceland and Fire really well, and I love them. And Bitter Blue is also a good book, but it's more of a companion novel, and you have had to read the other ones before you read this one. So I would totally recommend buying Fire and Graceland before you would invest in Bitter Blue if you are going to invest in Bitter Blue. The writing is so good, and there are pages that look like this in the book, and you just remember it, and you just love it, and it's just so good. Oh, it's so good. She's an amazing author, and if you want action and adventure, and maybe only a little bit of romance, definitely pick up these books. Now there are two more series, but I wouldn't say that all of the books in the series are memorable because they are more standalone books. So I'm going to treat them as standalones, but I put them all together to show you which ones that I thought were the most memorable out of all the ones that I have. They're historical fiction books, so I have the Dear Canada series, and out of that, I think that the one that is the most memorable is Alone in an Untamed Land. This book I think was more memorable to me because of my connection with the Field of Roy, coming to Canada, and my history being related somewhat to the novel and what they're writing about. A memorable book, and if you want anything that's historical, fictional, and just kind of different to read, rather than the regular young adult novels and adult novels, contemporary, whatever you're looking for, historical fiction, if that's what you want to shake it up to, go to one of these books. If you're interested in Canadian historical fiction, the Royals Diaries are also really good, and I have two that I thought were really memorable. I remember reading them in grade 6 or 7, I think it was when the last time that I read them, and I still can remember both of these books really well. Some of the other ones I read not so much, but I definitely adored Marie Antoinette and Cleopatra. They were both very well written books. The next standalone book that I have is Bella at Midnight by Diane Stanley, and this book I picked up on a sale rack for $3. And this is probably one of the most well-read books that I have. If you ever need something just like a standalone book to pick up and go on the car and you want to reread it 1,012 times, definitely a book that I would get. It's medieval Europe meets Mulan meets feminist movement, and it's definitely something that's totally different to anything else I've read. I haven't read a series that's similar to it yet. One little book, because it's not a very thick book, jams a ton of things into it. And the romance is definitely there, but there's also all these other things that are stuck with medieval Europe that we know and we love. I would definitely say if you could find a copy, give it a shot, give it a read. I don't think you'd be disappointed by it. Last book that I have as a standalone book is American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. It's totally different from all the other ones. It's a contemporary, and my little mind really likes books that have a little bit more gore in them than others. None of the other books have gore in them or anything like that, but this one did it right. Everything was mixed together perfectly, and I definitely want to do a review or a book talk on this book specifically because I adore American Psycho to the core of my being. It's something that I picked up and I read 3 or 4 times. Each reread that I've done of the book, I found something new and something interesting and something that makes it even more memorable than the last time I read it. I definitely say this is a great book to pick up, and you will not be disappointed if you read this book in any way, shape, or form, because I went in with low expectations and came out loving this book. So interesting, so interesting. Definitely pick up a copy if you're looking for something more contemporary and maybe you want to go into the mind of a serial killer or something like that. It definitely goes there. So I think that these books cover a pretty broad range of books that I've read. I don't have all on here that maybe I would want to, but these are the books that I own that I remember reading and can remember page by page waiting for the next thing to happen. And so these are my most memorable books that I own, and the books that I definitely recommend finding a copy of somewhere and reading them. Now, I want to know, what are the most memorable books that you own? Are there any that really stick out in your mind and you're just like, you need to read this because this is my favorite book in existence ever? I want to know because I always want to read new books. Send me books to read! If you haven't subscribed yet, click that button down below and let me know what you think and what you want to hear from me. If there are any books on this list that you want to talk about, please let me know. I would love to do a book talk about them. As always, I'm Fallon, and thanks for hanging out with me.